Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Super excited, thrilled for our special guest here today, Jim Hamilton. He is a serial entrepreneur, the CEO of Identity Ventures, and the director of the programs for principled entrepreneurship and an adjunct professor at the prestigious University of Dallas College of Business. So, Jim, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Kip. I appreciate that. You read it just like my mom wrote it, so thank you.
Yes, obviously a huge.
What do you mean? I'm in your presence, the guy that's got 5%, the top 5% all podcasts in the United States. I'm lucky to be here.
Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate that. We actually had top 3% yesterday, so we're
Holy
moving in the
cow.
right direction. So that's
I'm
exciting.
sorry, I blew it.
No, well, go. I obviously we've talked before and super excited to share your story with our audience, and obviously a huge fan of UD too. But usually I start out with just origin story. So think of it as if, comic book issue one, just kind of your story of who you are and how you came to be doing what you're doing now.
Well, it's often, these stories start by the grace of God, right?
Yes.
So, it's timing, just being in the right place, at the right time is a lot of my story. And a lot of my story centers around the computer industry. So, I kind of was at the right place, the right time as computers were starting out in the retail space and, was able to carve out, through various jobs, different formats and selling computers in retail stores, and then of course selling computers online and so forth. So, I started out in Montgomery Ward, and most people don't even remember Montgomery Ward anymore. But at one point they were the number one and number two retailer of computers in the United States, which in those days, it was brands like Epson and Smith Corona and brands we don't even think about being in the computer industry, but they were very big in those days. Compaq, IBM, Apple, Hewlett Packard, all those names had not even entered retail computing yet. So there were some names kind of filling the blocks out there. And then, got recruited to go to Circuit City to launch their computer division there. And of course, Montgomery Ward, computers became the largest division in the company. At that time, it was a $9 billion private retailer. And then, of course, at Circuit City, it became the largest division. And then I was recruited to come down to Tandy Corporation to run a company. I was vice president, general manager of Computer City, which was a CompUSA type retailer, a computer superstore. So I went from big box to electronic superstore to computer superstore, and created all those formats along the way. But Computer City was great. I mean, it was kind of like we had a whiteboard and we went out there and we absolutely, dug deep into what it meant to be in the computer business. We had 10,000 software titles on shelves. In those
Wow.
days, broadband wasn't broad enough to deliver software titles. So you actually had to come into the store and get a box and go home and load your software on a computer. And, as a matter of fact, talking about broadband, it was dial-up in those days. So, as I'm sure you remember, we old timers could sit there and, you would start your computer modem and you could hear it dialing into,
Uh-huh.
the network somewhere. And you could tell by the tone of the dial-in, the connection, what speed
Yes.
you connected at. So you would know if it was going to be a good day or a bad day.
Uh-huh.
So it was fun times, and 10,000 software titles, all kinds of brands of computers. And then it became pretty exciting because, Apple wanted to come into the arena. So we had to help Apple, come into the arena. And I ended up being on the Apple Retail Advisory Board. Intel didn't know how to do Intel at the time. They were trying to figure out what it meant to be a chip inside a computer. They wanted their own branding. So,
Uh-huh.
kind of helped them through, Intel inside and connected them with a company that most of us know out of Wisconsin that made lawnmower engines and tractor engines and so forth. And Briggs and Stratton
Uh-huh.
was the name of the company. And, they were the kind of the same thing. They were an engine on top of a lawnmower or an engine inside a tractor. And, we connected the two to help them understand how you get your branding if you're not really the brand.
Yeah.
Intel, we did Intel inside, and it was just fun times. Packard Bell, kind of pushed Epson and Smith Corona and Canon and companies like that off the computer shelves, and then became 50% of the market share in the computer
Huh.
industry. So it was just absolutely fun times. And then after Computer City, we sold it to CompUSA, and I created a company with the founder of Packard Bell called Argo Quest. And Argo Quest was then we raised somewhere between 50 and $100 million to invest back in 1997, which was a lot of money in those
Sure.
days for a fund. It was actually a holding company, not a fund, but we invested in Israeli technologies. It was totally focused on Israel. Jason, my partner, the founder of Packard Bell, was an Israeli, and he had access to all these Israeli startups that wanted to come to the U.S. and be like Jason and start a big company and so forth. And of course, being in the computer industry here in the early days, I knew I knew the Michael Dells and Steve Ballmers and people like that,
Sure.
and was able to open doors. And of course, Montgomery Ward and in Tandy Corporation were big importers out of the Far East, so I had all kinds of connections in the Far East. So we were able to do a lot of things. Had a few IPOs out of Argo Quest, and just some fun times there as well. Bringing Wi-Fi, for example, to the
Huh.
U.S. And of course, when we say bringing Wi-Fi, it might be a piece of our technology would be applied to some other company somewhere, and then of course, I got to go back and take the helm of RadioShack. I was executive vice president of RadioShack. That was after the IPO market crashed on us in 2000.
Uh-huh.
Was able to go to RadioShack, take the helm of RadioShack, and as executive vice president over marketing and merchandising and product development and global sourcing and RadioShack.com and all those good things. And it was fun times there as well. As a matter of fact, in those days, RadioShack sold more mobile phones, than Circuit City, Best Buy, and Walmart combined.
That's
So they were
amazing.
just absolute rock stars in the telecom industry. And then when the chairman that brought me into RadioShack retired, I left and went to work with a little company in Israel called PowerMat that became what we know today as wireless charging in phones, or a piece of wireless charging in phones. So it's been a nonstop, and then was recruited away from there to go to Motorola to run global retail and
Mm.
distribution. Motorola had split into two companies, the police radio company and the mobile phone company, and they were putting together a management team to run the mobile phone company. And the CEO there, Sanjay Jha, said, we're a takeover target. So we expect to be bought. And sure enough, within 18 months, we were suddenly named Google. Motorola, a
Yeah.
subsidiary of Google. And so some great times, some great stories along the way. It's been a crazy career. My mom and dad will sit there and say, well, he can't keep a job. He's all over the place. But no, it's been some great times. And of course, I've taught 8 years now at the University of Dallas, which is in the classroom, which has just been, a phenomenal experience. University of Dallas is a little different university. It's first of all, it's Catholic,
Uh-huh.
and secondly, it all about a classical education. So instead of pumping students up with some political theories that that they're never going to make money on, we teach students how to think.
Yes.
So, all of the basics, all of the classics, they have to learn foreign languages. They have to, understand philosophy. They have to understand politics. They have to understand sciences. So it's back to way universities used to be,
Hmm.
with a nice classical liberal arts education where, the goal is to teach them to think. and what questions they should be asking when situations arise. And of course, we, through my involvement in entrepreneurship in the business school, it's all about principled entrepreneurship. We think entrepreneurship, but then the question is, what is principled
Mhm.
entrepreneurship? And am I rambling on too
No,
much?
this is amazing. This is fascinating. This is perfect. Keep going.
I thought you were going to tell me time's up here any second now.
No, no.
But principled entrepreneurship is all about, taking, being entrepreneurs, but at the same time, in business today, in leadership today, we really need to start looking at, what does it mean for us as humans to be starting businesses and growing companies and so forth. And that's where the whole principle piece enters in, because we look at it, on virtues and so forth. And we say that, first of all, first and foremost, we're all created in God's image. So we have to treat people with human dignity. So part of the problems in workforces today that you hear, the employees talk about is, the CEOs don't treat us fairly.
Mhm.
Well, first premise is, when you're starting a business, start with treating your people fairly from day one. So one of the key things I talk about in entrepreneurship is it's great to have this greed mentality that we started, in the 80s with Wolf of Wall Street,
Uh-huh.
all those things. We as a human, are out there to do what God has chosen us to do. In many cases,
Yeah.
it's to create businesses and to create jobs, and those are good things. But at the same time, we need to make sure we stay focused on looking at the human aspect of the whole thing. And then the second piece is, look at it from the employee standpoint. So
Uh-huh.
employees, shareholders, environment is kind of how we want to focus people to look on business today and leadership today. So it's a different twist on things, but it fits right in with the University of Dallas overall philosophy.
That's
Okay, I'll
incredible.
take a breath.
No, that's incredible. What maybe along that vein, how has your personal definition of leadership evolved over the years and as you've gone through your different roles and businesses?
Well, it is interesting because you get, at least I did, I got caught up in the fast pace of the computer industry. And of course, I was doing this in, the 80s and 90s. And you get caught up in the fast pace of that whole thing. I remember going on a business trip, a buying trip to Asia to buy CD-ROM drives in those days. And, everything in CD-ROM drives was about speed. They would make them faster and cram more on the CD-ROM and so forth. And I remember going to Asia, and when we started, I'd go for 3 weeks and we would hit, Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, and then Shanghai or Beijing or somewhere in there, and then maybe other places as well. But I remember starting the trip out, and we were at 2 speed and given a price by the vendors. By the time I got to the end of my third week, we we're at 16 speed, and we
Really?
were beating the prices of 2 speed. So, I mean, the industry was moving very, very fast. So a
Huh.
lot of it, from a business standpoint, was just hold on. And
Yes.
you know, you really had to put together a team that understood how fast everything was moving. And, I didn't realize it in those days. I like to say I like to help ordinary people do extraordinary things. And I think that's where that started, is because, we needed the right people in the right chairs. And, we sometimes think of that as a cliche, but it's really true. And that's really held on, over the years, is getting people that really buy into the job and so forth, and is a team player. And the team player aspect is a big deal because, you really need everybody pulling. You think big companies are poised to just do everything right. And Computer City was a company that hit the they were, let's see, number two to hit $1 billion, second fastest retailer to hit $1 billion, and then a year later, second fastest retailer to hit $2 billion.
Huh,
And Sam's Club, by the way, was the number one.
really?
And here, you think, okay, well, that's pretty cool. They're pretty big. They've got it all together. And I remember pulling together a print ad when we opened Canada, Toronto stores in Canada. And the president of the company was in Canada, phoning me back saying we couldn't see from an inventory standpoint. The system wasn't working right, so we couldn't see what they had in inventory. So he's telling me, well, you got a stack of this, you should,
Oh
and that's
my
how we
word.
put together the ad was,
That's amazing.
yeah. So a lot of things, have changed from that standpoint. So you have to have patience. So
Hmm.
leadership, that taught me patience along the way. It taught me how to, deal with employees and really, convince them, to buy into what you're doing. And if they're not buying in, it's maybe maybe they need to look at, being in marketing instead of buying, or being in replenishment, or usually there's jobs, for good people. But
Sure.
it's really, the leadership piece has really changed. I think at some point, I got caught up in, we were all caught up in that Wolf of Wall Street. You got to go out there and you got to deliver profits every quarter, and
Uh-huh.
bad things are going to happen if you don't. So it's great to be able to transition through the years to looking at, the people really make the difference, and, focus more on all of those things have to work. But at the same time, it's the people that get you there. So even though I understood it or knew it back, in the early days of computer retailing, it was really later that I really said, I've got to make a concerted effort here with people to treat them differently, and we will get to that, mind and soul and body and so forth, embracing them to get them to the next level as well.
Yeah, no, very, very good. How about like over time, how did you think about or actually like invest in your people? Like, what did that mean as you've made that reflection on your people?
Yeah, I mean, it was always amazing to me. I would, as I would move from to a different job, as we sold Computer City, or as, I got recruited to from Montgomery Ward to Circuit City and to Computer City. There were always employees that wanted to go with me, that bought into it and wanted to go for the ride. And sometimes, they were older people that, would cash in their retirement along the way to come for the ride. And, suddenly you have to be, that was really a wake up call if they're taking their retirement and they're moving into the
Hmm.
unknown like that. Here I'm a young guy moving, and not a lot of retirement built up at that time.
Uh-huh.
And, they were really risking, probably a lot more than I was at the time. So you really get that deep down, I've got to take care of these people. They're believing in me, so I really have to do more. And I'll give you an example of, I went to, started this company in Greece that, after I left RadioShack, it was a company that wanted to go do e-commerce, and it was called getitnow.gr. They were the Greek patriarch over there, and wanted to get into the computer business, or wanted to get into the online business, wanted to be an Amazon in Europe and so forth. Didn't know how to get there. And so I went, lived in Europe, lived in Greece for, a while, helping them, get online. So I had to raise money, I had to get a name of a company and all that stuff. And the workplace in Greece is totally different.
Uh-huh.
They have very set rules for their employees. They come in at this time, they get lunch at this time, and they don't work overtime, and there's certainly no weekends and all those things. And I was on a pretty strict deadline of getting this company up and running. And we were in Amazon. We were the Amazon of Eastern Europe. And, we had, which meant we were playing in more than computers or electronics. We had jewelry, and we had clothing, and we had all kinds of things. And the cool thing about that was the broadband over there was truly broadband. So
Hmm.
over here, in 2009, 2010, we were still, many areas of the US were dial up. So they were still trying to plug into
Huh.
that phone line in the wall, and that's how they connected. And because of that, you couldn't do video, you couldn't do a lot of things. Pictures were slow to load. Over there, it was very fast. They skipped over the copper line, phone line going into the house, and laid a very fast system of the internet. And because of that, I could do video and all kinds of things, which is really what enticed me to go there. But by the time, you treat the people right. And they used to tell me in staff meetings, as I would hire the first person and the second person, that I'm totally different because I don't scream at them. Mentality over there was, I guess, people got screamed at. And, I would, go into everybody's office every day, which has kind of been my MO since the very beginning, is I would go and talk to the people in their office every day. And it got harder to do it at RadioShack when you have hundreds of people reporting to you.
Sure.
You try to get into the people's office and talk to them and see what's going on and so forth. So in Greece, it ended up that, there was a cafeteria in the building. I went
Mm.
down there to see how much it would cost for me to buy lunch for everybody every day. Well, it was only €2 to buy lunch. So, I could buy, which started out as, my assistant to, a staff of people that was in the 30s or something like that. It wasn't very expensive. And so I ended up buying lunch for people every day. And then, if we were working on a project, I would have ice cream brought in the afternoons and so forth, and just doing stuff like that. Never thinking about, the effects of what that would have, other than it was just the right thing to do. People were
Sure.
working hard, and I would play music, in the office, which was also not unheard of. I learned a lot of Lady Gaga songs back in the. You want to hear me belt out bad romance? I can do it.
You're welcome to do it if you want. You're brave enough.
So before I knew it, they were coming in early, working through their lunch, staying late, and coming on weekends, and I never asked them to do any of it. It was just they bought into wanting to be part of this and feeling good about their lives and feeling good about their jobs. And when it was my time to come back to the US, I'd hired a CEO to replace me there. And it was my time to come back to the US. I mean, there were tears, and
Huh.
it was kind of a sad situation. But that's what I mean. Treat people right from the very beginning, and you never really know what, overall that's going to do. And, they helped meet all the deadlines and all that I could have never met if they didn't buy into it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Um, I mean, this kind of leads into the next topic, really, is building culture and core values. I mean, you're perhaps inadvertently doing it. But what are your thoughts, or how have you thought about in your different organizations on, building culture, and then how have you looked at core values and the importance of having strong, defined core values in your organizations or in personally too?
So in the entrepreneurship class, which is kind of the basis of starting a business today, I stress that they have to build a code of ethics in from day one. And I give a lot of examples out there, for example, Uber, where
Huh?
the CEO was accused of providing hookup lists to the employees before company meetings, and who you can hook up with and who you can't, and those type things, and just helping them see the bad things that can happen
Yes.
in organizations out there today versus, we all want to get caught up in building and growing our business. And sometimes entrepreneurs, have to give up a lot of things. But, if you build a good code of conduct going in, it will help you stay focused. It's almost like a mission statement. And
Hmm.
mission statements are great, but a lot of times they don't, they can kind of uh, point you in a direction sometimes that you never really meant for it to be. But the way it's worded and so forth, you spend a lot of time, and is this word right and that word right? The code of conduct is pretty straightforward. It's really getting into, these are the things that we believe in. These are the things you can do. These are the things you should never do, and so forth. And, start from there. And it's got to be bought in at, the management level. you can't have one code of conduct for employees and another code of
Mm.
conduct for management. And that really is something that I just stress over and over and over. If the rule is, a buyer can't take a gift, then the CEO shouldn't be taking gifts.
Uh-huh.
If the rule is you get 3 weeks vacation, then the CEO should keep his 3 weeks and not be jetting all over the place in the company plane, doing places. It just sets a bad tone, for things. So, making sure that that code of conduct applies, and it's up to the CEO. Like to say, as Benjamin Franklin said, the fish rots from the head down. It's up to the
Uh-huh.
CEO and the management team to really focus, your company on doing the right thing yourselves, and then they'll see it and they'll get in line. Just like I'm a cufflink guy. And
Uh-huh.
I go into companies and I don't say anything about cufflinks or, suits or anything, but I'm a professional kind of guy when I go into companies and so forth. And it started out because that's how I had to dress. That was the
Right.
rule, right?
Right.
Back in the day. And you didn't even get away with, your pants not matching your coat. You had to
Uh-huh.
wear a full
Uh-huh.
suit. So, I've always been a cufflink guy. And before I know it, I'll see employees start wearing cufflinks, and so forth. So those little things, those messages you give off,
Yes.
employees pick up on it. And you've got to be real conscious when you're setting the ethical tone and the tone for your company, the messages that you're delivering to your employees. If you're a family guy, they pick up on being a family guy. I had a guy come into me at one point, and he he said, I know that you're a strong, you have a great relationship with your wife, and I know that
Uh-huh.
you're a strong Catholic, and you're very close to your girls. And I've been living with my girlfriend now for 10 years or something like that, and we're getting married, and we would like you to come to the wedding.
Mm.
And, we've seen what, living in a situation like that. So, those things just tug at your heart. You don't think about the vibes you're giving off. And yet, by being that type of person, you're affecting people's lives. And I think the older I've gotten, the more I've looked back on trying to make sure the messages I give off, that they're positive messages, that there things can go wrong, and things do go wrong in startup companies and in business and in life. They sometimes they get challenging, but it's the signals that we give off during those times is how we. And as a leader, you can't bottle it all in.
Mhm.
You've got to have people you can talk to, or there's a deacon on the University of Dallas campus that runs campus ministry. That's great. He's a former police officer. I was a police officer when I was younger, so we really hit it off from day one. He's a Canadian,
Uh-huh.
and he's a great guy, and he and I like to bounce things off of each other, and so you don't think of you think of. Him being a religious person, but he's got great life experiences that he can call on and say, well, later, this is what happened to me, or this is what you should look at, and so forth. So you can find these mentors, these people that you can talk to in very different places. It doesn't have to be CEO to CEO or
Uh-huh.
CFO to CFO, or it can be all kinds of people.
Yeah. University of Dallas is the most incredible, educational, moral, virtuous institution I've ever encountered. How did you come to UD? How did that become a thing where were leading the entrepreneurship, you know, study and to be able to teach there? How did UD come together for you?
Well, we I have two girls,
Hmm.
and at this point they're 40-ish, so they're not so young anymore. But when it came time for college, I really wanted them to go to a Catholic university, and I wasn't hearing a lot of good things from a lot of
Hmm.
Catholic universities. They were kind of Catholic in name only, and many
Yes.
times they changed. They were no longer saints; they were names of cities, or you know
Right.
Yeah, so
Uh-huh.
it's, you know,
Mhm.
um, so I really wanted him to go to a good Catholic university. And the more research I did, I learned that, I had one of the best ones right here in my backyard. I mean,
Huh.
I live on one side of the airport here at DFW and it's on the other side. So, I can make it there in 20 minutes,
Uh-huh.
and, I wanted them to go away to school to have that experience. But at the same time, I did not want them to get caught up into being at one of these state university schools, 50,000 students getting lost in, the things that happen on campus and so forth. I really wanted them to have a personal experience. And of course, spending the semester in Rome at the University of Dallas
Yes.
is an absolute big deal. So the oldest one went there, they're a year apart, they're 16
Okay.
months, but in school wise, they were a year apart. And the oldest one went there, loved it there. She got involved in the education um, department and ended up coming out of there as a teacher. And then the youngest one went in, she got her degree in business.
Uh-huh.
So that really, and then of course, we went to church together on Sunday. So it was
Oh,
close enough that I
yeah.
could I could go there and we could all go to church as a family. And
Yeah.
Cistercian Abbey is across the street, even though the Dominicans have a church on
Uh-huh.
campus there. Right across the street's the Dominican Abbey,
Yes.
and it's a very proper and very faithful Catholic mass. And we went there, and the kids would come home on Sunday and do their laundry at home. And many times before we would even make it home, they would fill up the cars with students and we would go buy breakfast or lunch or those type
Uh-huh.
things. So that happened every weekend for
Oh,
4 years.
that's
So it
amazing.
really it really bought us into being part of, the campus and so forth. And then, while they were finishing up their bachelor's degree, I decided, you know what? I'm a senior executive with RadioShack and I should get my MBA. It's just a box I wanted to check. It's not
Uh-huh.
something that I thought from an advancement standpoint would do me any good at that time, but it was really something, a box that I went. So I went to the University of Dallas and
Uh-huh.
got my MBA and learned what a
Yeah.
great program, the MBA is there as well. One of the top MBAs here in the Metroplex and certainly, nationally and internationally as well. So
Yes.
did that, and then over the years, just met a lot of people. And I had ended up when I was at Radio Shack, one of the deans from J. Lee Whittington, who is the dean again,
Uh-huh.
and some other folks asked me to schedule if they could schedule or if I could schedule a trip for the students to Asia to meet with companies in Asia and to basically set up an experience for them with factories and so forth. And I did that.
Wow.
So that's how I got into. I did the same thing. After the people at TCU heard I was doing that, they
Uh-huh.
also asked me to do it. But I set the trips up for them to be able to go to Asia and meet with companies and see factories and international business and so forth. So I'd kind of gotten to know some of the deans and professors and so forth. And then when the entrepreneurship job opened up, they kind of knew me
Uh-huh.
and it was kind of a natural thing to kind of transition into the role. So I've been doing it for 8 years now. Haven't missed a semester,
Uh-huh.
and I love every minute of it. So I've taught entrepreneurship there, I've taught marketing there, and I've taught leadership ethics, which ethics is something near and dear to my heart. We as a country, we as people, we need to build more ethics into our lives.
Yes.
We need to get away from the greed mentality and build more ethics into our lives. Just even if we picked one of the, if even if we pick just treat people with human dignity, you
Mm.
know, that's what we need is everybody's created in the image of God. Treat them like that. Treat everybody like that. When you're standing in line and you didn't make the flight, remember
Yes.
that you're equal to that person across from you. There's no sense belittling him and so forth. Didn't have anything to do with it anyway. So
Yeah.
I start when I start ethics in class, I will bring in kind bars
Uh-huh.
I will bring in a treat and they all get their kind bar and I say, remember the first step of ethics is just being kind. So when you think that you need that little extra boost, buy your employees a kind bar and remind them and remind yourself that it starts with kindness to one another.
Yeah. It's amazing how when you do for others, it just instantly, you can't be upset or mad or feel down if you just go do a kindness to somebody else. It
Right.
just they can't happen at the same time.
Yeah.
And I have a really good friend that to use your example at the airport, one of those times where flights are delayed and they're delayed and delayed and the ticket taker person's getting screamed at by for people for hours and he just kind of saw that and he knew he was being delayed and just kind of got off his seat and just walked right up to the front of the line and just said to the woman, I'm going to go grab myself a cure, but what would you like? And she was prepared for him to scream at her and she gave her order. And he brought it back and she's like, just stay right there. I'll take care of you. And sure enough, 20 minutes later, whatever, she came and she got him all teed up on his flights and stuff, but just have that act of humanity and really maybe you can speak to this in business too. I mean, doing the opposite of what everybody else is doing. Everyone's being so negative and attacking, and he, brought some positivity to her and did a kindness, or looking at opportunities in the marketplace when everyone's going one way, you go the other way, and often that's where the opportunity is too.
Absolutely. We same thing, it carries into marketing. You
Mm.
know, we in the early days, my marketing budget at RadioShack was $450 million.
Word.
So, we had all kinds of money to do things, but you had a template that said you spent so much on TV, you spent so much on newspaper print, you spent so much on, sponsorships and so forth. And that template didn't change much over the years, from Montgomery Ward to Circuit City, the percentages were all basically the same, depending on what you wanted to accomplish or whatever. And then we get into social media and it changes
Mm.
everything.
Right.
And we get into all of a sudden we're trying to understand what does a like really mean, on Facebook? What does that thumbs up really mean to a business? And here the industry went, oh, we got to get likes. Well, it wasn't really about the likes. It was about if something was going on in your company that you were responding to the customer. And
Yes.
so many people had gotten away over the years where, customer service meant you put a call in and it was answered in some foreign country somewhere,
Mm.
and they couldn't relate to what you were experiencing because they weren't part of it. They were just an answer center somewhere, call center somewhere, and so forth. Or it was you had sent a message that was never responded, and that is not how you should be treating your customers. You should be
Hmm.
responding. So, then it got into, okay, well, we need to talk to these customers. So, you would get things on the CEO would say, well, I'm up and going this morning. I'm going to Starbucks. Well, the customer doesn't want to hear that either. Well,
Right.
I had my Starbucks. Now I'm going, customer doesn't want to hear that either. They want to believe that the company's running good. And you're, as a CEO, we put our faith in your brand. Uh, but if something's happening, if you're going to launch some new product, tell us about it. If something's happening with a product that's not good, tell us about it. Tell us how you're fixing it, what you're
Uh-huh.
going to do, and let's move on.
Yes.
You got to build all of that stuff in with interaction with your customer that they really care about. The more a lot of companies still today think that the more I put out these LinkedIn's or Facebook or Instas, the more I'm communicating with the customer, the better. I'm in their face. Well, that's not necessarily what they want.
Hmm.
I don't want an ad from Samsung, every minute of the day, even though I love Samsung.
Yes.
I don't want to see that. I want to see what I want to see. And it's not, every minute of the day. So we need to back up with marketing and look at from an ethical standpoint what the customer really wants and how we need to treat the customer. It's part of the four planks of building an ethical company is how you deal with your customers.
So maybe to that end, what are the four planks?
Well, first of all, it's employees, right?
Hmm.
its customers, its shareholders, and its community or environment. And those are the things that really a company needs to be aware of. And back when I was taking business classes many years ago, those were the things that people talked about. It was really the greed piece that somehow took off, and we suddenly stopped thinking about things. But there were times when, employees were equal to customers. You wanted to make sure your employees were treated right, did things for your employees, and they were part of the boardroom conversation. It wasn't just about, are we going to make a number this quarter? And we need to do it at all costs. Oh, we're not going to make the number, fire people. It really, there was no runway for people at the top other than cut, because it was greed. And little did they realize that at some point you just need to treat the people right. And like I said earlier on, suddenly deadlines get met, and positive things start happening because the people make it happen.
Yeah. How about, you've been through some the beginnings of many things in the tech space. Any particular, just looking to the future, and as you're maybe talking to your students, future trends or opportunities you see in the marketplace that you're most excited about?
Well, again, we're all trying to learn this whole AI thing, right? And I think that we in the tech world, are involved in technologies that today we look at it as one term, and then they'll rebrand it something else, and then it gets rebranded. So just a few years ago, AI was called big data, and how we're going to deal with all this data that's coming in. And that's kind of what AI is it really was able to, computer processing speeds now have gotten to the point where it can handle big data. And cloud computing is suddenly to the point where we can store big data. And now what do we do with big data? And I think that's really where AI has, if we think about it as, it's nothing different than we're doing. Computers still process data. It's just how good the data is. We used to say, if it's good going in, it'll be good going out. If it's bad going in, it'll be bad going out. And it's kind of the same thing with AI. Where are they pulling the data? And I think that's the concern today is, the stuff, you type something in one of these AI search engines, and that's really what they are. They're search engines, and you're just focusing through your queries, you're focusing, on where to get the data. And then it goes out and it looks to see what data is out there. And, the sad part is it's, again, up to these programmers that program all that stuff. So, they wanted to hit deadlines and so forth. So a lot of the early days of AI was, okay, well, if we can't cite this, if students are really into, if you get data from somewhere, if you quote something, you got to cite it. Well, if they couldn't find, if AI couldn't find, where it was cited at or where it came from, they would just make it up. So those are the things that we've got to figure out over, before we all embrace this thing to change our lives. And it's kind of, I look at it like we did when we were bringing computers in. When I was in high school, computers, or calculators were still so expensive. Most students couldn't afford them. They were over $100 in those days, and you couldn't afford it. So I learned on a slide rule how to do multiplications and all that sort of stuff. Then calculators came about, and the world changed. So people at the time were saying, well, all these jobs where people had to spend all this time doing calculators, that's going to speed things up. Well, if it speeds things up, will it force people out of a job? Well, I don't think it did. And then next thing you know, we got these computers here, and all these secretaries that were spending time on typewriters, how is that going to change their life? It's going to force all those people out of jobs. Well, it didn't. They just got better at being a computer, a typist, or they got better at creating better documents, or all of those things. So it's caused people to transition along the way. And now, we're looking at, okay, we're going from computers to to this AI driven by computers. And what does that mean? Well, AI, my wife says, I don't want to get the new Apple phone. And even though she loves Apple, I don't want to get the new Apple phone because it's got this AI built into it. I don't want to be part of AI. Well, Apple did a bad job. I mean, I think if they would have explained that it's taking a look at the data coming in of what you're trying to take a picture of, and it's correcting blemishes or flaws or those type things, by using the technology, then everybody would want it, right?
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of what I see this AI thing going to. The other thing that's on the horizon that it will really change a lot of things is the speed of the internet.
Mm.
And there's a lot of companies today that are we're at 5G today, and we've all gone through analog, or I won't say we all, but we went from analog to digital,
Yeah.
and then we got the 3G and 4G and 5G and 3G's fallen off, and we're getting to 25G. I mean, that's going to be coming soon. And at 25G, the data speed's going to be so fast into cars and all those things that suddenly, driving, the cars that are being driven without a driverless cars, are getting real-time data, and they can bounce it off things, decision computers or other things than what's only in the car, what the little computer in the car. Same thing with airplanes, same thing with all kinds of things. It's real time. And because of that, 25G, our homes will change, our connectivity will change, cable, like I said, when I started, computers were 300 baud, and they were, if you wanted to connect to the internet, you plugged it into a phone line. Well, that's certainly and then it became wired, networked, to the back of the computer via network cable, and then it became wireless, and then it became Bluetooth, and then it became Zigbee, and there's all kinds of these wireless technologies. Being a ham radio operator, I like to remind everybody that all these are just radios.
Uh-huh.
And if you start thinking of them as radios with antennas, it makes it a lot more simplistic. Well, sitting in your driverless car with your radio connected out there to a computer somewhere via radio waves, at 25G, you can do lots of things.
Sure.
And, I was always told, I sat on the Intel's retail advisory board, and had the opportunity to spend time with Andy Grove, who was the famous CEO of Intel. And he wrote a book, Only the Paranoid
I
Survive.
just finished it like last week.
Did you really?
Amazing. And that's the first time I've read it. Yeah, it was
Strategic Inflection. I've got an autographed
incredible.
copy, which I cherish.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
But he talks about his strategic inflection points and
Yes.
things in there, and we really, they used to talk about how changing the speed of the chip from year to year, Moore's law, processing speed, and so forth. We used to look at it. We were held back by screen size, we were held back by processing speed, and we were held back by input. So even though we can make a lot of devices smaller or bigger as we needed them, phones were a certain size and screens were a certain size because that was the limitation of the glass, maybe, when you're making the screens for a phone. It wasn't necessarily that the industry, the technology piece couldn't get there. Maybe it was the glass people that couldn't get there. So there's all kinds of pieces that have to fit together in product development, when you're creating things, but trying to get all of these pieces together and not be held back anymore by input. Input's still an issue, I think. I still look back at my BlackBerry and think, why don't they just bring that keyboard back? It would be so much easier than this sort of stuff. But so I mean, I think AI is going to, really change the world. I think, this 25G, will cause us to be able to look at things like we've never looked at them before. If the processing in cloud computing wasn't where it was at today, we couldn't do a lot of things, including driverless cars and so forth. If you can't process geez, there's a car coming at me, should I move? You can't
Uh-huh.
have a driverless car,
Right.
right? So the processing speeds are continuing. But this whole AI thing, when you really think of what it really is, it's just going out there looking for data, and it's going to pull that data and it's going to feed it back to you. And people have written scripts for it on how to respond, and how to respond if you ask it a certain question. And you want to make sure that there's got to be some sort of an ethical standpoint in the data.
Yes.
You're inputting data. um, there's got to be an ethical piece of that whole thing where AI is pulling data from that's reliable. And we've seen that's very tough because, there's been a lot of talk about fake news, over the
Uh-huh.
last few
Uh-huh.
years. The same thing when you look at AI. If
Right.
it's out there pulling data that is not legit. Think about trying to send people to the moon, and you go to AI and you ask the distance to the moon and it's off. You
Right.
know, that makes a big difference. Well, it
Yeah.
makes a big difference in all of our lives too. If we, are relying on information we get. Um, there was a commercial a few years ago, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a very pretty lady walking down the street with a pretty gruff looking guy, and she's dressed, you know, very prim and proper and so forth. And this guy's in a t-shirt and everything. And the whole premise was, the guy says he's a French model, and she says, I met him on the internet. Well, he was no more a French model than the man. But because it said it on the internet, right?
Right.
That's how we have to look at AI today too, is
Yeah.
until it gets better, until people really, we're so much in the early days of what's going on here. And I've seen that with computer technology products or technology products over the years, is they get refined and then they get refined and then they get refined. And again, many times it bounces back to input, screen size, and how you're going to the battery life of the whole thing. Well, battery's coming around.
Right.
Battery's coming around as well. Not where we need it to be. I remember when I was at Motorola and we brought out the battery that could last 24 hours, was amazing. Apple came out several years later, but having a day-long battery changed the way I did
Uh,
business, because you were
Absolutely.
constantly lugging cables and all that, around. So
So I think you have a unique perspective on this question as it pertains to AI, especially teaching at University of Dallas. What are your thoughts like in academics? So in school, the use of AI for students in their work and just implications coming down the road. And I mean, with UD being very traditional, classical, how do you think about AI in the classroom and students using it in their studies?
yeah. So it's really got to be a combination um, of both. I mean, AI is here to stay. It's not going
Right.
away.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have to learn how to apply it to our classes. And, I still think on the liberal arts side of the business, the philosophy and Socrates and Plato, and you just have to read that. I mean,
Right.
you could always buy Cliff Notes. It's not like it's new information.
Right.
Plato's not rewriting a new treatise or anything. So you really need to read the work and learn the work. And I think those type of classes, they're I think the way they're taught at UD, where the professor, we're all professors at UD. We don't have, teaching assistants or
Right.
anything. You get a class at University of Dallas. You're there in a small size class with a professor, and that professor is going to be looking you in the eye, and they're going to know if you know the material or not.
Right.
But better off, it's not a punishment. It's where
Right.
that professor needs to spend more time with you. And that's that personalized treatment's really what you get at the University of Dallas. So I can look at my students in entrepreneurship. Now, in entrepreneurship, part of the process is you've got to write a pitch deck, and you look at a business plan, and you do all those type entrepreneurial type processes. Well, you can do a lot of those today with AI.
Right.
So if you can do them with AI, then okay, well, that's how people are going to do it. That's how they're going to walk out of the class. So maybe they should learn how to do it the best they can do
Right.
in the classroom using AI. So you have to teach AI. You
Mhm.
have to you have to be able to say, this is how you get to this. These are the software pieces that um, that I use to build a pitch deck. These are the ones that I've learned, that go well. I took a class when I was in Greece. I took a class at the University of San Francisco online, and it was advanced internet marketing, or advanced social media and internet marketing. And it was a master's certification type number of classes, and I had nothing to do by myself in Greece, so I just went online and learned. By the way, online classes have changed a lot since
I'm
those
sure
days.
they.
But so that I got my certifications, and I felt good about it. And that was in 2010. In 2013, I get a letter, an email from the University of San Francisco saying, we'd really like you to re-audit these classes. The information has changed, so we don't want you out there with certifications from us, basically. That said, they didn't say it quite directly, but that's really what it meant, is they were giving us the opportunity to audit these classes. So we were same thing in 2016. So the information, it's changing so quickly.
Right.
And you can't teach business today unless you're teaching what they experience in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Business schools, to me, the liberal arts school is going to teach you how to think. We're going to teach you how to apply.
Right.
And, we have to be on the forefront. Accounting's accounting. But today you can do great things with AI on building spreadsheets,
Yes.
building Excel spreadsheets and understanding data and all those things. If that's available, you got to be able to teach the students what to use and how to use it, and ethically how to use it. A lot of that stuff, stretches the envelope still today. And, is it good? I read something the other day that, one of the ways a professor is not at the University of Dallas, but one of the ways that a professor is weeding out students that are just copying a question and putting it in AI and then printing out the answer and feeding it back to the professor is they put a couple of words in there in white, so you can't read the words.
Yeah.
And it negates the answer, or changes the answer. So if they've only copied and pasted, they miss that because it's they can't see it on the screen. So they copy and paste it in, and next thing you know, it's spitting out an answer. So he can tell immediately. Now, I'm not saying that that's something that we should do, but that's kind of the thinking that's going on. And it's a big dilemma in the academic world, is
Right.
how do we treat this AI? And it was a great question you asked, because we're still dealing with all this stuff in real time today.
Right.
But I'm a true embracer. I have to be a true embracer of technology. I've been involved in it so long. I hate the way the direction of it is gone in many cases.
Uh-huh.
I hate the fact that that porn is a big
Yes.
They wouldn't have access to a lot of porn if it weren't for some of the technology that I've helped deliver. So, I live with that as well.
Yeah.
So technology can go the wrong way. Again, ethically, we have to teach them, ethically, the right thing to do at the right time. But AI and fast speeds. We're already at terabits, storage, so the storage isn't really a factor anymore. I wish we could bring back the BlackBerry.
You want your buttons back.
I do. My thumbs probably couldn't take it anymore. People were, walking around with bandaged thumbs and putting it in. No.
Yeah. How about any particular advice in perhaps you can just think of with your students, just that you give to young entrepreneurs aspiring to succeed in today's economic and moral culture?
Yeah, that's a great one. Again, it is so easy because a lot of businesses go neck and neck with the dark side of the world, in computer world, in programming, dark hats, white hats, black hats, white hats, and so forth. And so that's out there. I mean, in business, it's out there today. So to focus our students on going down the path is you have to have somebody you can talk to along the way. Find that person, and they don't, like I said early on, they don't have to be somebody that's identical to you. Look at people you have a good relationship. It might be somebody you sit next to in church. It might be, grab a cup of coffee with somebody, meet people. And that in college is many times one of the toughest things is, people don't want to come out of their shell. So, in entrepreneurship class, they're all in a group. So they're all constantly working, and I force them, to do presentations and so that they get to know their group. But find somebody, whether it's a student, whether it's a friend at home, or somebody you can talk to help focus you on the path. And then, at least in the Catholic Church, we have our Catholic virtues and so forth, and know those Catholic virtues,
Yes.
and understand how to apply them, and stay focused on the good side of business, the good side of your new company, and what it can do if it goes the wrong direction. I remember when I was a young executive at Montgomery Ward, VCRs were taking off, and it was great that you could, most people used it for, you would record your favorite TV program and you could play it back. It was kind of the early days of streaming, right?
Right.
You controlled all the buttons. It was a lot easier to find stuff in those days, though,
It's true.
because you only had 4 channels.
Yeah.
Or at least we only had 4 channels. But anyway, that's what most people, and they had to decide if they wanted to spend a lot of money on a VCR just to do that. Well, what really started happening is the sales started taking off, and unfortunately, what that allowed to happen was all of that great things of capturing, a sporting event and being able to, go play with your kids on Saturday afternoon, and you'd catch the game because you would have recorded it, allowed to do a lot of positive things, but at the same time, it created the porn industry, bringing porn into the home, because now all of a sudden porn videos were available. So,
Sure.
these things, many times they go side by side down the same path, and you really have to stay focused on, as I like to say, running into the light versus, letting, going off into some of those darker areas. Now, was there a lot of business over there on the porn side? Good people have gone over there and made lots of money and lots of greed? Absolutely. But, they probably wouldn't be happy in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
So stay focused on what you learn at the University of Dallas, and, from how to think, and using, the virtues of moving forward and the ethical standpoint. And it's all about staying focused. And if you get off, it's okay. What you need to do is get back on the horse and get with somebody who can, hold your hand and take it. I love to mentor students. I love to help them. Many times I'll be sitting in my office and a student will ask me a question, and I'll be answering that question, and I'll see, a photograph I have, a painting I have, of Mary on the wall, and it will take them right off into a different direction of, well, by the way, I heard this the other day, and what do you think about this? And, being able to talk to them and answer their questions is, something that I absolutely enjoy. It's not really a job for me. It's really, first of all, they keep me very excited,
I'm
and
sure. Yeah.
they ask tough questions, so I've got to be on my toes, and things are happening all the time. They ask a lot of questions about AI, so you got to be ready to answer, or you got to be able to answer it together, research it and answer it together. But it's a great experience, being there to work with students and help focus them. And then you hope that by the time they graduate, they get into a company that's also ethical focused, and that their CEO is focused, not like Uber CEO was focused on, but was focused on virtues and ethics and so forth, which will just help them continue to the next level. My daughter, companies she's worked for in the past, you can see where they didn't really, a lot of the CEOs were younger in startup companies and so forth, and they really didn't have that ethical piece. They didn't really know how to manage people and so forth. And suddenly, they had an idea and they suddenly thought, oh well, I'm the CEO, so I can do what I want. And
Uh-huh.
that's really the piece that's missing. And hopefully we at University of Dallas, focus the students on that's not everything. Being
Yeah.
CEO is a tough job.
Hmm.
And being able to do whatever you want to do is not one of the, the roles you
Right.
get to play.
Right. That kind of leads. So two more questions. So, and this kind of
Sure.
leads into the last one. Just how have you thought about just building lasting legacy through your business ventures and also through teaching? Just how do you think about legacy?
Well, my legacy is going to be my family,
Right.
right? I mean, if I can, it's if I can make sure that I'm doing what they need to see and be involved in to get them into heaven,
Uh-huh.
to me, that's the legacy, right?
Yes.
And same thing, that's how I embrace the students too. If I can help them um, with their road to, you know, being positive, we like to call it ethics, it's also teaching them, the way to get into heaven as well, to,
Yes.
the way to have a spiritual life and so forth. Um, that's what I like to see. I like to, I get so many calls from students that have been, away from me for years, and suddenly they'll want to connect on something, and making myself available for all that, making myself available for Zoom calls or whatever. It's not just business. So they might have a business idea they want to talk about, but there are so many other things, and I think that that's one of the things that they'll find at UD is there's so many people there with big hearts that want the same thing. They want your student to be successful. And like I said, when you have, classrooms of 30 or less,
Yeah.
it's like a kindergarten class. And
Uh-huh.
look how the students embrace their kindergarten teachers or their second. Well, at University of Dallas, it's small classroom size as well. So a professor and a student really get to build a bond. And especially if you have that professor for multiple classes, they know you and you know them, and they're just sponges. So it's it's exciting times when we're able to see students be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. And then last question for you, what is your personal definition of success?
Well, that's a boy, you talk about something that has changed over the years, right? I mean, it used to be getting to the next level in a job someplace, right? And suddenly, I got, can you buy great things, or can you go on cool vacations, or some of it's, at some point, those aspirational things like that, they just fall off. They
Right.
just don't matter anymore.
Uh-huh.
What matters is spending time with people, or, getting to, my family calls me church boy, because if I go on a trip, we're going to visit some churches.
Right.
We're going to
Yes.
see you know, these things that are built to the glory of God out there, and they're just so beautiful, and they're worth being seen. Somebody spent a lot of craftsmanship and everything getting into them, and I think um, that my ideas of what's important have totally changed. And I have a grandson now, and it's building
Congratulations.
time with my grandson and
Yeah.
making, my daughter is a single mom, so making sure he's got a male influence that's positive in his life. I'm a big believer in Boy Scouts and character
Uh-huh.
building and all that. He is on the road to Eagle Scout, and it's keeping him
Amazing.
on that character and leadership building road, and working with him to get over that and giving him the opportunities. So going to Philmont, the big Boy Scout camp in New Mexico, and camping with him, or just doing things with him, spending time with him, carving out time with him, that I probably missed when my kids were younger, because I was focused on getting to the next level of a job or something like that. So the idea of a legacy has totally changed. Now now I'm focused on, doesn't matter the house size, doesn't matter the car. What matters is, spending time with him and making sure that, he is focused in the right direction.
That's incredible. Well, Jim, this has been absolutely a blessing for me and for my audience. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I really, really appreciate your time and
It's
thoughtfulness.
my pleasure, Kip. I mean, I appreciate you doing this. and I know you are a strong Catholic and a strong believer and a strong
Yes.
ethical person, and it's always great to share, your thoughts and so forth with somebody that actually gets it, that lives it, and I'm anxious to get your son in class. So
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And
yeah,
we'll be down at UD here in February for a visit day with one of our other kids. So hopefully I'll get a chance to say hello
yeah.
face to face.
All right, thank you, my friend.
Good.
Good talk
Yes. And
today.
again, we'll share in the show notes information on you, on University of Dallas, so people can reach out if they have questions or want to learn more about UD. But again, Jim Hamilton, serial entrepreneur, CEO of Identity Ventures, and this is worth repeating, the director of the programs for principled entrepreneurship and an adjunct professor at the University of Dallas College of Business. Jim, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kip.
You bet.
Have a
You
good
too.
day.
You too.